can wait then. We can
He's in
wait.
the parking lot.
Should be here
Okay,
soon.
we can wait. I'm good. Okay, so
I think we can start.
okay. Okay, we're going to wait for Mr. Lynch to get here, Officer Lynch.
Used to be free. This is their proposal. And then we took the 5,000 of the extra here. Raised it both again, Which difference between these two ranks so they can.
Does everyone pretty much have a take-home plan? The federal government. Federal USDA for all counties, 421,000.
Hey, Mike, how you doing? Come on.
Okay, we're all set.
Just saying good morning. I know we're on session 14 of bargaining agreement, right? Teams came together I want to say last week, and feel like we're close to resolve, so I'm hoping that happens today. On behalf of the superintendent and this team, saying good morning and ready to get started. Ms. Vicki?
Good morning. This is actually session 12.
12.
It feels a lot more than
Perhaps
that.
felt like 14.
12, 14, whatever.
It feels a lot more than that, but I think we met with the chief for over 2 hours after our session and went over our proposals, and we've made some changes, some things we need to stick to, some things that we've made significant movement on, and we have our logic and reason behind that. So just going on the first one in Article 12.2, I know you're concerned about the 260 duty day probation rather than putting it on a month to, 14 months or whatever. We felt that the 260 duty days was what the district uses to monitor for 1 year. So it basically gives the 12-month proposal, but in duty days. And we put language here that the employees can access the probationary end date in PeopleSoft because they can. It's a much more effective way of doing it. It also is a more equitable way of doing it because depending on when an officer is hired, let's say they're hired if we did the 14 months, if they're hired in November, beginning of November, they're going to get the benefit of the week at Thanksgiving and the 2 weeks off at Christmas or winter break. So that's 3 weeks there. They're going to get that twice. So that's 6 weeks that they're not actually physically working, that they're getting credit for working for their probationary period. The 260 regular duty days keeps it equitable among officers. Doesn't matter when you get hired, you're going to have the same number of duty days, the same number of opportunities to be evaluated and observed. So that's why we're sticking with the 260. We just think it's fair to all our officers.
So how would that work with the PeopleSoft? You just mean they can log into basically their account and see?
You log into your account and you can see it'll have, probationary. There's queries you can run that to pull when the probationary period ends. We can certainly get that information to the officers. I can talk to PeopleSoft people who can give like a step-by-step direction, and we can certainly give it to AC Weiner's done this way this time, to the chief and AC, and they can distribute to the employees so that they have a way of looking at it. We can show it to you. Maybe we put it on the bulletin board. We could put it on the intranet so the officers would know how to find it, how to look at it. And then, again, it's equitable.
So, you guys have 260 duty days every single year? Because I thought it changed. That's-
No, ours, 260 duty days is for a 12-month employees, that we work pretty much every day, with the exception of the holidays. We work every day, we work, 4 weeks in the summer, every single month. We work, Monday to Thursday, the 10-hour work days, June, July, August. We work, full years. So if you look at, somebody like in my position that is considered a 12-month employee, I'm a 260 duty day employee. Police officers are different, teachers are 196, bus drivers are 182. That is like so a full year for a teacher is 196 duty days, full year for a bus driver is 182. We look at our unit, you wanted the 12-month because we had 18 months. We feel this is a significant decrease in the amount of time that we have to see the officers at work. But we understood what you were looking for. You wanted the 1 year, that would be 260 duty days. It is more than than the physical year that the employees work in PBA because they work less. Some months they only work 11 days versus, what would that be, 20 for employees like myself. So it does extend it more than a calendar 12-month, but this does create equity among the officers. So it doesn't matter when you were started, you have the same length of probationary period. Same number of duty days for everybody.
I just think we wanted to be closer to 14 months, so I don't know how many duty days that would be, because this
I think this is about 15. So we-
I'm suggesting a compromise to lower it from 260 to 230, and I think that's meeting in the middle. We might, 230 duty days instead of 260?
230 days, 230 would probably just be a little shy of 14 months, I guess, yeah.
I think that would be a more equitable. You all right with something like that? Yeah. So if you guys are willing to compromise on that 260 and make it to 230, I think we'll be able to agree to it.
Well, I can have AC Weiner speak to the concerns, because we do have concerns about that.
Yeah, thank you. So as it is, we have a disparate, not a disparate, but a distributed workforce, and our supervisors don't spend a lot of time one-on-one with any particular officer. And I think we're already concerned going from 18 months to 12 months that we're going to be able to properly assess and evaluate these officers, that after probation, they have a property right interest in their positions, and it's a lot more difficult to remove a problem officer after the probationary period. So I think reducing it from 18 months to what we're proposing here today, 260 days, is already a significant reduction. And, we have a very limited number of supervisors in the field, and so it's very difficult for us to adequately assess the personnel for the long term. And I don't see how it benefits the officers in the field if we don't have competent and capable officers in the field, because that just puts the burden on other officers.
I think 15 months, 14 months is where we wanted to be, so, I don't know how many duty days exactly it would be from,
We don't know if somebody's not capable
It would
of
be
doing
around.
the job.
so 240 would be similar to the 14.
Close to this number.
So I'm not sure I follow you. So you're saying we're just in trouble anyway? We have to deal
No,
with it?
I'm saying that if we haven't determined if an officer in 14 months isn't capable of doing the job, 2 extra months isn't going to make the difference.
Why is it not going to make the difference? That 2 extra months may be the period during which something's discovered.
I have a suggestion also,
It could be discovered after 16 months too, though.
Yeah, it could be.
It could be discovered at any time. But you're going to know, or you should know, we've all been in the business, we know pretty much
Yeah.
within the first year if an officer is capable of doing the job.
And they
Well,
You
did,
usually tell within 6 months.
I don't know if you're relying on any studies to back that up. but
No,
I'm not
no,
aware of
no.
any.
I want to say something. The FTO process, that's the main reason for the field training officers is to notify the department when they're having these officers in training with them, to notify the department in their evaluations that, hey, this guy's lacking or this guy's an issue. So that's your first line of defense there, and your most important one, because they're with these trainees every day for the whole time that they're in their FTO. So in the past, I know a lot of those a lot of those FTOs evaluations were being ignored. I believe the department needs to start paying a little bit more attention to what your FTOs are telling you, and you wouldn't have this problem.
And they do have contact with the supervisor, I think, don't you do?
Yeah,
I mean,
since I've been here almost 19 years now, and since the first day here, it's just the nature of the beast. We're in individual schools, we're not there with a supervisor. You have one supervisor for the zone. They're never going to be able to visit, these officers every day, spend a lot of time with them. So
I think that's our argument. We have, first of all, a lot of our supervisors are covering campuses on a daily basis. They don't spend a lot of time with these officers. We need the extra time to assess them, and that's why I think that the 18 months was even, in this scenario, the way we do business, is a tight timeline. And you're suggesting we go down to 14 months. What's the justification for 14 and not 260 days?
Let's be for real. You're a supervisor, you have a zone, you're covering a zone with maybe 7 schools in it, between 5, 7, sometimes even more schools. How much time are you going to spend with each officer at their school in a day?
I mean, we're trying to work with you. We really did want the 12 months because that's what the teachers get. And I know you say that's statutory, but I mean, that's standard everywhere else. And cops aren't always on like the regular work week. You guys are. So, I mean, we were comfortable with the 14 days. I think, he said 230. Maybe we could meet somewhere around 240 if that's closer to the 14.
So teachers have a 12-month probationary period, but their supervisors are with them every day. They're on campus with them every day that they're at work.
But they're not in their classrooms all day long.
No, but
They're in their
there.
classroom a significant period of time because under the Marzano method we have for evaluations, there's a certain number of times they have to be in the classroom, and they're required by their supervisors to do instructional walkthroughs. They're in the classrooms all the time. The principals are not sitting in their office. They're actually in the classrooms almost on a daily basis. Maybe not in one teacher's classroom every single day, but very frequently.
Okay. I think we'll have to caucus on this because, I mean, we're trying to work with you, but.
And we're trying to work with you as well, because, you wanted the 12 months for us. 12 months is 260 duty days. So we came to the 12 months you wanted. It's just a different way of looking at it. So we feel like we've made significant movement from 18 months to 260 days. And, for us, it's a safety issue. Yeah, I know that other employee groups have smaller, they have a smaller number of days for which they're evaluated or for probation, but you're the only ones that have weapons on our campus, right? So while you're there to protect us, there's also a risk if there's an officer who maybe shouldn't be there. So we feel like it's a safety issue for us. We need to make sure we have the best quality, and we feel like we do with the 18 months now. We make sure that anybody who actually makes it through probationary is going to be the best officers we have. So, I appreciate you caucusing on that, and we can.
How many weeks total are you guys on break?
Well, so let's count it out. You've got 1 week at Thanksgiving, 2 weeks at winter break. You've got a spring break, plus however many weeks in the summertime that they're not working. So that's at least 4. Plus any of the holidays that they have during the year that where a teacher's not working, where they're not on campus. So we'd have to get the calendar and kind of look through it, but it's a significant number.
Okay, all right, we'll talk about that.
I'd like to add one
Standard
more
officer
thing.
on the road goes also 30 days vacation a year, plus sick time, so there's also equal on that, and it's
Work
good.
less.
And not to mention all the extra duty that these officers are taking, that now you have time to evaluate them during their extra duty also. So, let's meet somewhere in the middle.
I'd like to add just one more thing, and that was that just in my short tenure here, is less than 3.5 years, I've seen officers let go, terminated during probation within the 18 months, but we would have not been able to terminate them if it was 260 days. And so those officers did not meet the performance measures that we expected, our expectations, and were let go. So what you're describing right now are scenarios where those officers would still be with us today.
Well,
So that does not do the department well, and it doesn't do the officers that have to work alongside those other officers.
That's a
very
yes,
good either.
that's a yes and a no. I understand what you're saying, but it's also, as a lot of that blame has to be put on the department for waiting for the last minute to do it. You know, these officers don't just show up at the last, right before the end of their probation, a week before, and start messing up then.
Well, there may be a situation that occurs at that point that they've not addressed before.
That's right.
Be-
And I believe under those two scenarios, those issues happened after the 260 days.
A scenario, something, well, that can happen that can happen anyway.
But
The
there's a difference
majority of
when
the
you're on
officers that are
probation and when
being,
you're not on probation.
the majority of the officers that are being let go, it's not a surprise that they weren't meeting expectations. So to wait for the last minute to do it, that's an issue with the
We
department.
also do feel like, and AC Weiner can speak to this, I know I've had employees I've had to let go on probation, and I try to give them every opportunity to improve and to show that they can do the job, because, it is somebody's livelihood, and particularly in your case, it's somebody who's put a lot of training and effort behind it to get to that point. We do want to make sure that if it's not just because they made a careless error, it's because they can't do the job. So, AC, if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, what the 260 days are going to do for us is make us make a decision earlier on that would not give an employee an opportunity possibly to mature and become more experienced, because we have to make that decision before probation's up. And I can say that we make every effort right now to try to keep officers employed with us and give them all the opportunities possible during the 18 months. We're not going to have all those options if we go down to 260 days. And lastly, I just want to point out that I don't know of any, I can't think right now of any officer that was terminated after their probation period during my experience here. But I can tell you that we have let officers go before the 18 months. And so I'm going to suggest that shows that the vetting process is working as intended in the way it should be. And to reduce it may be irresponsible in some regards.
In your last, excuse me, sir, in your last department, how long was the probation?
18 months. 18
months, and what department was that?
Coral Gables.
So basically, what we're coming down to, what we're haggling over is 20 workdays.
And we're-
20 workdays, and I've been doing this, maybe a supervisor, even longer than the chief. I don't think that 20 workdays as a manager and a supervisor in NYPD, that I could not tell you that that officer was not going to make it with 20 more workdays. I feel that an officer, ours was 12 months, that whether it be 14 months or 15 months, that all of us who are here can come to an agreement that this guy's not going to make it. There are people here who are beyond that, in my opinion, that should not have been here. So they do fall through the cracks. I do not think that 20 extra workdays is something to go back and forth on.
And we can correct that during the FTO program, because we're not doing the same amount of the standard FTO program either. We change it amount to do to the officer. So we're not giving a full vetting on these officers either. Everybody's getting a different.
But just for the record, we're not talking
Standard.
about 20 extra workdays. We're talking about from 18 months down to
No,
200.
I'm talking about us haggling over the 14 months versus the 15 months. That's what
Yeah,
I'm
but you're
talking
not recognizing that we've already gone from the 18 months down to the 260 workdays, which is a significant reduction in the amount of time we have to evaluate officers. And now you're
Right.
suggesting we go even further by another 20 days.
Right.
And I'm saying it's near reckless to have an officer that's not as vetted as possible out in the community. And I'm just saying we need to move cautiously through this.
Well, in
And
in the beginning, how does that work? Like, you guys check in monthly, I'm sure, with the supervisors to see how the new hires are doing and things like that. So it's not like you just make the decision at the tail end of the probation.
We need the time to be able to assess officers in different scenarios, and those scenarios don't happen on a schedule. They happen periodically, and I'm sure your members will actually acknowledge that the things that they handle don't happen every day. They happen rarely and over an extended period. And the shorter we make that period, the less opportunity we do to have an evaluation opportunity for those scenarios.
So we can, if you would talk about it during your caucus, we can certainly talk about it, but I feel like we've gone, again, from 18 months to the district's 12. We feel like we've made significant movement. You asked for 12, we gave you what is the standard 12-month in the district, so that we have equitable treatment among the employees. So I would just ask you to consider what we've said, and we can move on to the next article, go over the next material.
We will, and we appreciate it, but I just think from our view, the standard 12 months is 199 duty
Well,
days.
actually, that's not true, because that takes into consideration a lot of holidays that they're not working, so,
That's not a duty day then, right? The holidays?
You couldn't, evaluate those days anyway.
correct.
So it's 199 duty days is what we're talking about.
Well, we can move on. Article 17, you'll see on that first page, which is page 3 of the proposals, it's all pretty much the same language we've talked about before. I think we're all in agreement on all of this, down to the bottom. In 17G, we had talked about, we made these exceptions for, you couldn't use comp time before those breaks. We made some exceptions, including the fourth one, which is, written approval from the chief of police. There was some language that you had given us, but the language that you gave us is more to show why an exception wouldn't be granted versus why an exception would be granted. It didn't fit within the parameters of this language. So we didn't add anything else. These are exceptions to the rules. And it is prior written approval from the chief of police and his or her designee. If it's not going to impact the operational functions, it's not going to stress the system out by allowing an employee to have comp time on that, day before a holiday, it's going to be granted. And that's where that granting comes in, is in H.1G4. So the rest of that on page 4 is the same language as we've offered before. I think we're all kind of in agreement with those. In 17.10, this is the language about contracting with outside for those extracurricular functions and how we do that. We crafted the language so it aligned with what you were asking for. It's school, and if declined or more staff is needed, then to the sector, zone, and then district-wide to all officers. This is the language, this next sentence is the language that we had agreed upon last time as a compromise. In case where the number and/or timing of call-outs for an extracurricular school function tax the capacity of the system, the district may offer the extra duty work on a district-wide basis as the initial step. Then 1712, we made significant movement on this one. This is that before, you'll know, we had the offer of just having a study about those canceled functions at the last minute. So what our compromise language is for you, your consideration is that they're notified less than an hour prior to the start time of the work. The officer is going to inform their supervisor. Then the officer will get 1 hour of pay at the rate of the outside detail or extra duty work would have been paid for the missed work opportunity. And then this sunsets on December 31st, 2022, because as Officer Lopez asked for, we've put in 17.15, the language that we would be doing this study. So this language would be here until January 1st of 2023. But in the meantime, while we're studying it in the committee, officers would get at least 1 hour of pay for any canceled functions. And then we have in 17.15, that's that language we're going to study and make suggestions for a rotating seniority wheel, as well as the frequency at which outside details or extra work is canceled without notification to the employee in a timely manner. And again, that committee would sunset on December 31st, 2022. Both parties have a right to have 3 appointees from each party at the table. So do you have any questions on 17?
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay.
So we sat here last time, and we had a promise from the chief that he would assist us to get the 3 hours for the officer's pay if anybody's lacking it. If anybody was having an issue with collecting the 3 hours, that the chief would assist us.
Right,
So
that
how's
was
it-
the proposal we had last time, but you insisted you want to get paid, you want to get paid, you want to get paid. And we talked about the fact that some of these details may not be for 3 hours. We felt that if it's canceled with 1 hour's notice, we would pay for 1 hour.
Well,
That's in the interim while we're studying it. This,
1
I
hour.
felt, was a compromise.
1 hour doesn't cover 1 hour doesn't even cover your travel time back and forth. so let's be honest. The 3-hour was, if you were worried about the detail only being 1 hour and the officer's getting paid for 3 hours, then a clause like the officers will get paid a minimum of 3 hours unless the detail was less than that time, in which case they'll just get the amount for the detail, the 1 hour or the 2 hour detail. But this 1 hour doesn't cover anything. It's kind of like a, you know, it's.
I think we're worried about the situation where they have to drive, far to get to where they're going, and then it's
Well,
canceled.
let's talk about where those extra duty work is, because in 1710, right, we talk about the fact that it's their school first, then their zone, then district-wide, right? So it should be at their school, which is their regular travel time, which usually, shouldn't exceed 20 to 30 minutes unless they live outside the county, and then that's not really our issue. Because those are usually, from my understanding, within your region, because we've set that language up, right? So it's going to be first offered at
But if
schools.
nobody takes the detail and the first person takes it, lives 30 miles away.
Right, so now we're getting into the real exceptions
Okay.
to the rule,
Well,
right?
that's what we're talking about. I mean, that's why we have these different things here, and we're trying to say, well, this is why. The one incident we talked about was out in the Glades, and the officer was driving out there. He doesn't live out in the Glades, but he picked up the detail because nobody else wanted it.
And we had 2 hours, so I mean, I have to speak with them, but if we lowered it from 2 hours to 1, we would at least want it for pay, for the amount of time that the detail.
Well, see, that's what we offered last time,
been.
but then we were told, no, we don't want that, because we said we're going to study it, we'll talk, that way the supervisor works it out. And from what we understand that we heard from AC Chief Weiner last time, was that in the majority of the cases, the officer is getting paid the full amount.
Well,
But you guys wanted a set amount, we offered a set amount, this is what we've offered.
I don't
Um,
think
we feel it's a good
That's not how
compromise.
I understood what you offered
We've never
last
asked to
time.
get paid for the full amount. Most of these details aren't occurring exactly when the school ends. So your school is from 7 to 3, you work in a high school, and at 3 o'clock you're off. Most of the details start about 5, 6 o'clock. So the officer's sticking around in uniform on his own time just to work this detail. Now that 6 o'clock comes, he's working a night school detail, which most of them start at 6. He realizes that night school was canceled. So you mean to tell me 1 hour is a reasonable amount of salary to give this officer a pay for sticking around? Now he's going on, by the time he gets home, it's 4 hours later.
What we had offered before was that we would work with them and work with the school so that we could get you paid for the full amount if we could. That's what we offered before.
But
But
it
you guys
wasn't,
said you
it
didn't
wasn't
want
a
that.
guarantee of pay. It wasn't. It was just a let's wait and see, and then it'll be some sort of resolution with no definition.
So, and
it
then what you
wasn't-
asked for, you wanted something. That's what we heard. We want the officer paid for something in the interim while we're studying it. This is the something we're offering.
Okay, but I think we want what they actually would have been entitled to, what they
That's
would have
not,
signed
that
up
wasn't even
to
your
for
offer that
working.
you had on the table before. So, I mean, we keep shifting these positions back and forth. We heard you what you asked for. We feel this is a reasonable compromise.
My
But to say,
offer
no,
was-
we just want what we want. is-
My offer was 2 hours. If it's canceled
Right,
with
and
2
this is-
hours, then
this
we
is a
get 3
compromise.
hours of pay. And then I said, well, if you're worried about the details that are less than 3 hours, we can do it just for the amount that the detail would have been.
And we feel this is a compromise, so that's why we offered it in this way. It's a compromise. Because again, it's fiscally irresponsible for us to commit to paying money for something that we don't know how much it's going to cost. So that's why you said you wanted something in the interim. This is something that's in the interim while we're studying it. It is for 1 school year, and then at the end, when we have the study committee, if it comes out with something else, then we have something else to work with. But right now, we don't have any data to support that either this isn't happening 100 times or it's only happening a couple. And so, we've got your anecdotal data, but we want data that occurs at the real time, so we're not asking officers to think back, well, how many times has this happened over the past 2 or 3 years where you didn't get paid? Where we're relying on memories that may not be as accurate as they could be when if they're telling their supervisor on the day it happens, it's noted, it's put in a file, this is how many times it happens. So this was our compromise language.
Okay, we'll have to talk about that. And then I had one other question. So we wanted, I guess like a 7-day window to request use of the comp time. So I was wondering how that comes into play if we're keeping the May date for the scheduling, because you guys took that out. So I just wanted to be clear how that will work.
This was just went back to the status quo language.
Okay, so they schedule it just by May, they schedule.
They schedule it prior to May
everything by
15th.
May. Okay. Okay, those are our two main areas of concern. I mean, I think, I'll have to speak with them, but I think we're fine with everything else, so.
The only issue I see with that date is, in the past, the summer calendars, summer schedules haven't been coming out before that date, and it makes it impossible for the officer to be able to choose, you know, when he's taking his comp time if he doesn't have his summer schedule yet.
Well, the reason why it is that way is it is approximately 2 weeks before the end of school. Once school ends, you know, we have the provision in here where you can't use comp time if it's state mandated training. So that's why we did it the way we did it.
Yeah, but we don't.
And that's been the language for a number of years now.
I know, and it's been an issue every year since it's been in the contract, because the summer schedule, sometimes we get them the day before the last day of school.
You're just saying if you schedule your comp time in the summer and then training comes out during that time?
Exactly. So that's where the issue has been going. It's been happening.
Understood.
When do you all usually release the training schedule? Is that just,
AC Weiner, do you have an answer for that?
Yeah, I can answer that. We release the training schedule as soon as it's processed after we find out from the district what the summer schedule looks like for schools, for summer school. So historically, we are not given a lot of time. I think, you know, going back a couple of years, we used to find out in February. I think the last couple of years, it's been well into late spring before we were told what the summer school schedule was. It's impossible for us to schedule training without being aware of what our obligations are to cover the summer school campuses.
So,
It's just a product of the process.
so you usually get it after this?
so should that May date be changed to when the officers receive the summer schedule to make it fair on both sides?
Well, then it may be as early as February.
Well, that's fine.
Are you saying that you get it sometimes after May 15th?
I think last year we got it after it had already started almost.
It was still changing, I think, by the first day of summer school.
Yeah, and last year was a little off because of COVID and us with state mandates of things we had to do and offer summer school to a lot more students than usually get it. So that we were scrambling on the first day of summer school to make sure there was coverage. So, but ideally, if we knew in February or March, that would cut off the officer's time then in order to plan their comp time.
Right.
So that's why we were just sticking with status quo language.
So it's rare that it would come after this date?
Well, not rare, but I don't, it just depends. That's outside of our scope of work. It's in the academic division of the school district, so.
And I can tell you that just from the management side of the police department, that we make every effort to get that done as soon as we can, because we understand the impact on the officers for their summer plans.
Okay. Okay. And then for the Joint Study Committee, so I like the idea of, so are you guys intending to do some kind of like Google Doc or something that they can work with for that? Or that would be up to the Joint Study Committee to?
Well, that would be our proposal, but it would be up to the Joint Study Committee to determine how they wanted to gather that data. Our recommendation would be some type of Google Doc, since everybody's gotten used to using those, some kind of centralized system, or maybe even a Google form that they fill out. And because I know that's how we gather some data in the district, is there's a Google form available, and then it processes all that data and sends it right into a sheet for the supervisor. So the officers then wouldn't be looking at a Google sheet to see, well, let me see when Officer Lynch is working, or let me see when Officer Sullivan's been working, or had it happen to them. They would just have a form that they fill out to indicate that this was the event, this is what it was canceled. There'd be certain questions they'd have to answer, and then that would be dumped into a Google form that would not be visible to everyone.
Okay. Okay.
All right, moving on to 20. 20.1, we're just going to go with status quo language. I mean, it's one of those, if it's not broke, don't fix it. We feel like this has been working well. We're quibbling over small little words and details, and it doesn't make any sense. This has been working fine the way it has. If they change it and the union doesn't agree to it, they can always, like you said, it impacts terms and conditions of employment. They can file for impact bargaining or have some type of bargaining over it at the regular negotiations, but we'll just keep it as is.
Okay, yeah, my concern was that it's wages, so it's mandatory, so it would have to be status quo until any
Correct.
changes
Well,
made,
if you
so-
file for impact bargaining, it maintains it as status quo.
Well, yeah, that's what I think, but sometimes we get pushback on that, so, okay.
So in 20.2, you had language as amended. I don't know if you went and looked at the statute on this one, the 943.22. I went and looked at it. I don't think we want to add that language only because we're paying more than what the statute requires us to pay. So one, the basic only is for officers who were employed prior to July 1, 1980. We don't have anybody at that level anymore. There's not anybody here who's been working since 1980 as a role, in the role of officer. That's one issue. So, but we're not taking the basic part out. But the education for the four-year degree per statute, we're paying $80 per statute. It's $50. So if we go with the language you wanted as amended from time to time, we would need to change this language so that we're taking the $30 away from the officers, and we didn't want to do that. It's also would be impacted for if we did have anybody that was education with basic with a four-year degree. Right now, they get $105. That would drop to $75.
Okay.
So we just want to leave that status quo. We don't want to touch the officers' pay at that point. And then, let's go on to, so for, what is this, 20.3, with the special duty assignment pay, we can agree to raise the sergeant and the detective rate from $4,000 to $4,500. But that's kind of contingent upon the acceptance of the language in the sergeants. We're offering more money, giving to the officer $500 more, but we need the sergeant language in order to be able to do that. The K-9 caretaker language, we have it at an hour, like we talked about. You recommended the hour per day, $15 an hour at time and a half. So we did add that language. We talked to our legal department. They said we could go with a supplement, would be fine. We could still do a supplement as long as it takes into consideration like the average cost. We just felt this is a cleaner way of doing it. This is what you would ask for, so we're offering that. It's for each dog they're assigned per pay period as compensable time for the care and maintenance of the assigned canine or canines. So a canine handler with one canine would earn approximately $22.50 per day. The payment for caring for the animals applies to every day of the year in which the employee is personally caring for the animal or animals. Veterinary appointments and certification activities should be scheduled during their regular scheduled shift. If it is outside their shift, they would be paid for those hours in compliance with the law. We didn't want to just do straight, say it's time and a half, because if they're not, it's a week where they're not working, normally, it would not be compensable as time and a half under FLSA. So we want it complying with the law. So if they have to go outside for this or extends past their 40 hours, they would get time and a half for that work.
Okay.
Okay?
Is that taking away the actual supplement for being a K-9 officer?
Yes. They would no longer get the supplement, they get this in lieu of.
But they get another amount for food and things like that, or you
Yeah,
guys provide it to
the
them
district
directly?
pays for all their food for the animal. They pay for all the vet bills. So this really is just to pet the dog, love the dog, treat the dog like a member of your family. You're getting $22.50 per day.
The at-home
I
care.
know, but they're not getting anything for the actual assignment themselves.
That is what they're getting for the assignment themselves. All of these supplements that we give are meant to compensate them for the extra duties they're performing for these special duty assignments. That's what these supplements are for.
We'll talk about it. Okay.
So the non-contract day compensation, we agreed that it's $37 instead of $35. 20.5, we've agreed to the salary adjustments, I think, both of us. The next real change isn't until page 13. This is where we get into the sergeants. So again, we met for a very long time with the chief, going over this process. So I'm going to have Darnice pass some data out to you. So we pulled the data on the officers. We have a serious concern about having it at 5 years. As you'll see from this data, and I'll wait till Darnice gets this passed out to you, we ran the numbers and compared your proposal to our proposal based on gender and race. There's a disparate impact by having it at 5 versus 2, based on the fact that we've hired so many officers over the past 2 to 3 years. It has a significant impact on minorities and women. So if you'll look on the chart that we gave you, under the district proposal of having at least 2 years in the district, they'd have to have 5, but only at least 2 here in the district. There's approximately 60 females. For yours, for the 5 years, there's only 38. That excludes 22 women from possibility of even qualifying to be a sergeant. We have, in the district's proposal, 53 African Americans. Your proposal cuts it to 30. Again, that's 23 African Americans, so you're saying no.
That
You're
only
not.
affects the first year,
Well, no, this is,
under our proposal. We're
under
only
your
talking
proposal,
about-
you're talking 5 years with the district. We're talking 2. So we're,
We lowered it to 3.
We loaded it.
Yeah, we lowered it to 3, so.
okay. Well, this was your initial proposal versus our initial proposal. We just wanted to point out that we have a deep concern.
But this
for the
isn't- this
disparate
isn't
impact.
accurate then, if ours is
Well, it's
3.
accurate as to the 5 years, so we can go back and pull it and get it to you again, but there is a huge disparate impact to women and minorities, even when you drop it to 3. So we can pull that data, but what we're trying to show is that we are trying to open this up to more officers, to give more officers the opportunity to qualify. And this is just district experience, right? We're not getting into other qualifications, so I want to go through the other qualifications as well. So, again, the years of experience would also sunset in January of 2026. You know, because we're in a different position than a lot of other agencies because our force grew by leaps and bounds. We doubled our workforce basically in the scope of about 2 years. Other units and other agencies, unless they're brand new, have not had that kind of growth like we did. So that's why it's impactful now. Once we get past 2026, that huge hiring push that we had will no longer be an impact. So we can agree in 2026 that we'll go back to just, you have to have at least 5 years in the district. We narrowed under the qualification what we're calling character, no record of formal discipline is what we had before. We've narrowed that so it's a written reprimand or higher. So we're excluding the verbal warning and the written warning from consideration as being formal discipline. So it's only written reprimands, suspensions, or higher. So supervisory experience, we went with your language that they have to have the line supervision course within 6 months of receiving the assignment. We changed your language a little bit on how it's taught because we pulled the language of what they're actually called. The course must be taught by a FDLE certified instructor. So we added that. For education, we considered what you talked about the military. So we added 3 different ways you can get your education. You can have the conferred associate's degree in criminal justice or at least 60 semester hours at a college or university. You can have 4 years of active military service and received an honorable discharge, or you can have completed 120 hours of law enforcement job-related training obtained outside of regular in-service training. So this is something they've done on their own time, that's job-related training. So those are the 3 ways with education. So do you want to talk about the qualifications?
I think we're just processing. You
Okay.
can go on.
I mean, we did make a lot of changes. We did a lot of what you asked for, that we took to consideration what your issues were, and we feel we've addressed them there.
Okay.
There's a glut of new hiring, are we correct to say, that have 2 or 3 years of service right now?
Yes, that's when we doubled the force,
Right.
yes.
So therefore, the January 2026, it goes beyond that spectrum to get them up to the 5 years.
Well, we
above
can
that.
certainly discuss it, but we felt that January 2026 would get us where we need to be
Yeah,
with the
no.
number of officers we have and to get the supervision, the number of supervisors that we need. Because again, you know, if we're shrinking the probationary period, we need supervisors in order to cover and supervise these officers.
What's this number of supervisors that we need?
It depends on the size of the force.
All right.
There's a span of control that we're trying to meet, and it's typically between 8 and 10 officers per supervisor.
Okay, so using the size of the force that we have now, what's the number of supervisors you need?
Well, I can tell you that we have open supervisor slots today based on that scope.
It's a
Span
lot.
of control. There are
Do
vacant
do
spots.
we have a roundabout number, 5, 10, 15?
Depending on the level we're talking about, if we're talking about first-line supervisor,
Yes.
I'd have to get back to you on it, for the exact number.
How many uniform members of the service do we have right now that are in our department and not being from outside agencies?
I don't understand the question.
How many officers do we have, school police officers assigned to school at the present time, not excluding the outside agencies that we're hiring? How many people wear this uniform and go to work?
234, I think, is the number that I have.
The exact number, too.
Yeah, we can get the exact number. I
Because
think it's
therefore, that
234.
would tell us how many supervisors we should have. And this, I'm not going to go into it, but there's a much bigger problem that we're not even going to address today that has to do with being able to get people in, it's basically retention. We just, let's be honest with the gorilla in the room or whatever thing is paying with the lowest paid to be able, and people tell me to bring this up, so I guess I have to, I'm sorry. With the lowest paid in the county, we can't keep people here. They're leaving. There was another young guy just left this week. We're basically paying people, I'm working with officers, God bless them, making $77 an hour to do my job and everybody else. So why, and I keep getting this question, and it's just common sense, I'm sorry, is that we're paying an exorbitant amount of money for people to do our jobs where we can't even get a livable wage.
Well, honestly, if you go and look, we've seen the studies, law enforcement, we have the same problem in law enforcement that we have with the teaching profession. People aren't going into that line of work anymore. It's not about the money, it's about the
Sure
job.
it is about the money.
Some of it's about the money, but it's
No,
mostly
most of
about
it-
the job. If you look at studies on why people leave because of leadership. They don't leave because of money.
Oh, no, these people
Right,
here are
so-
leaving because of money. Because I'm telling you right now, I had a conversation earlier today with the Jupiter Police. They have 200 applicants, and they pick and choose. We take people who, I'm not even going to touch it because of the fact that I'll say it off the record, but I'm not going to say it here. I personally do not want to work with some people around this police department. I'll say that.
Well, let me just go back to, because that addresses the pay issue, which we've already kind of agreed in theory to what the pay was going to increase by. This is about the qualifications for the supervisors, for the sergeant special duty assignment. That's what we're talking about right here, is the qualifications for that.
I have a problem with this. Our last proposal was 3 years, so
Okay, we can go back and we can rerun those numbers. This was based on your original proposal.
Yeah,
I know,
so
but we
I
brought
would
something to
think
you
that
last
this
week that
gap
was different
would
than
be
that.
closed a lot. So, and I think that, you know, I'm a woman, that's great. We want women supervisors, but it's also very important for them to, you know, if you worked here longer, that should mean something.
Well, it does mean something, which is why we're agreeing to 2, but we're getting officers, because, you know, that are coming from other agencies who are coming to work for us, who have unbelievable experience working as supervisors in larger entities than us. They're coming from New York, they're coming from the federal law enforcement divisions, you know, Secret Service, or from, you know, from FDEA. You know, they're coming from all these different agencies with fantastic experience, and we're completely saying that your experience doesn't count. You have to be here 5 years. So that's what we're looking at. So we can certainly talk about it a little bit more, but we felt that, you know, our proposal was fair. So going back beyond the 2 years, is there any other issues you have with any of the other changes?
Well, no, but I just want to say that, I mean, we want seniority to count for
Yeah,
something.
yeah, and are we paying these new officers on their experience? No, they're coming in at the same pay.
Correct.
So we can't use that as a level of, because then we're saying, then let's go to a lower level to, you know, with some of these people. So we should say then maybe we want 10 years of total experience, maybe. You know, so we can use their outside experience.
Okay, that's a,
But I'm just throwing that out there. I'm not using that as a suggestion, but then you have some people that have 2 years' experience that, you know, may not fit those qualifications, but they're a good officer.
But all I keep hearing is that we have all these new officers coming from other agencies that come in with all the experience. What about all the officers that have been here?
well, and I understand that.
Let's start taking care of them, and
Well,
they're the ones
Officer
that...
Lopez, that's why we've changed these other
But
criteria as
they're the ones
well.
that have been here through thick and thin, through every hurricane, through every possible scenario. They come into work, they don't take time off as often. let's start taking care of the ones that matter the most.
And we agree with you. We agree with you, but we are
It doesn't
trying.
seem like that when you
Well,
keep lowering the
that's your-
standards and lowering the standards so we can take on, let's take on more younger, all these new people that are coming in from the road and forget about the older
We're
officers.
not
that
talking
have been
about
here.
younger officers, we're talking about officers that have already retired from other agencies, but that's why we're talking about these other criteria as well. It's not just the years of experience, but the education requirement is actually excluding a lot of people.
Yeah, well, we also gave, in our last proposal, we also gave you a fix for that.
Right, and we gave you what we feel is a good fix.
Okay,
Because the those continuing education credits, they're not defined in the contract of what does that look like and what does that mean. So, we felt like this language really defined it in pursuant to our conversation that we had last time. It takes into consideration the military experience, it takes into consideration other trainings they may have gotten with other agencies or on their own outside the regular
See,
workday.
there's an issue with that too, because supposedly training that you receive from an agency doesn't account for even in our career ladder. You can't use it towards career ladder, but now you're going to allow it to be used for a supervisor
This has to
position.
be law enforcement, job-related training, and it's obtained outside of your regular in-service training. This is our proposal.
Okay, just one other thing too, so did we look at the females and minorities that we hired that wouldn't fit into the current thing and see if they have
No,
any of
because
these?
we don't have that information readily available. We just have demographics, so that's what we
What I'm
pulled.
saying, that would probably
This
be,
gets
because
them
if they
past-
don't even fit this criteria anyway, so it makes no difference.
But it completely excludes them. It does make a difference. If they're not even there's such a thing in the law called a disparate impact, that you may not intend to discriminate, but the rules that you set forward do discriminate. So that's what we were looking at to see, does our number of experience, given the fact that we've hired, almost doubled our police force, do the criteria that we have in here disparately, unintentionally discriminate against people? That's what we were pulling the data. So we can look and get the data, hopefully relatively soon on the 3 years and get that back to you.
I think Officer Lynch also brought up, and I don't want to misquote you, you're saying that there may be some educational requirements that also have the disparate impact.
Correct.
All right, so I think that we need to really look at those educational requirements because they may be too high as well.
Right, but that's why we added the other criteria about the military service and also about the hours of training. Because we do want people who are qualified and have the background and the education necessary to do it. They may just have achieved that education through some other means other than going to college. That's why we added it the way we did.
I mean, this really speaks more to like the hiring.
No, ma'am, it doesn't. This speaks to who is eligible under their level of experience. 5 years versus 2. This is what the data shows from our workforce that we have now. We'll pull the data for 3 as well.
In terms of hiring, it actually shows that we've been increasing our diversity over the last 2 or 3 years.
Correct.
Right, hiring 5 years ago versus now.
No hiring over, versus 5 years versus what we've hired over the last 2.
Right.
We have definitely increased our numbers of women and minority in this field.
And I would say, just out of 2 females that I just trained, neither one would meet any one of these criterias.
Not this year.
No, that's what I'm saying,
You know.
yes.
You can't expect to
And-
start a
and they
new
won't-
job in
yeah.
a new agency and expect to be a supervisor a year later.
That's correct. That's why we don't have them coming in the door and saying, if you have 10 years of experience, you could be a sergeant,
But you have
walking
them,
in the
you have
door.
them 6 months off of probation, eligible to be a supervisor.
Correct.
So you work in an agency, you're on probation, you get off probation, you work 6 months,
Right, that's with an 18-month
and,
probation. Then yes,
correct, the way it's written, the way it is now.
correct.
Okay, so let's keep going.
So in B, we've changed the language, so they're sitting for the sergeant's examination, because that's what it is. Moving we took your language on the 30-day notice, we can agree to that. We took out the language about the purpose for job-related promotional examination because you had it in the bullet that's right after this on the top of page 14. So it talks about it has to be job-related questions. So we did take your language on that. We did lower the score from 80% to 70%. What we have in here is the candidates who receive a passing score on the exam will be rated from highest to lowest based on their test score. We're going to call that the graded list. The language further down in the next couple of bullets remained the same. It just added the fact that they have received the score of 70%. We took out any reference to the interview at your request. Going to the selection process, once the testing establishes a graded list, those who received a passing grade will be considered, and the graded list is by what you asked for, by the highest score to lowest score. That's the graded list. So we're going to do a selection based on the rule of 10. So the top 10 candidates can be considered, and it's a rolling 10. Once the selected individual is removed from the list, the next assignment continues on the process based on applying the rule to the remaining list. After December 30th, 2024, the rule 5 will apply, so then we'll move it to 5.
You don't see an issue with that part?
No, I
about the
don't.
Top 10?
But we
Yeah.
took out the interview section, so there
Sure,
has to
what's
be
the
some
rolling
other
10s
part.
just for people who are going to watch this from
So the
home?
rolling 10 would be the top 10 scores would be the ones that would be considered for any assignment. So if the top score is the one that's picked, the second highest score will become the first. The person who was 11th becomes the 10th person.
And what if it's not done in that order? This allows you to pick the third.
Correct, you could pick the third.
So you don't see an issue with that?
No, I don't.
Okay, I definitely see an issue
see
with
an
that,
issue with that.
and, you know,
Well, you're basing the whole idea of being a supervisor on whether you can pass a test or not.
Correct.
And we all know that leadership capability cannot necessarily be quantified in a test. So there are some officers that
Knowledge
you
can.
have who have done extremely well on the test, but have absolutely zero people skills. Can't lead their way with a flashlight,
well, we have that now.
right? Right, you have that now.
And then the,
With an-
and
well,
then-
when an
But
interview.
that's because the process hasn't been,
but the department's, the department's response to that is like, give us time, we'll teach them we'll teach them how to do it. So, and that's, a legitimate response. If they don't, we can't expect them to know the job as soon as just by going in. We'll teach them the job, how to
Right,
be a
and so that's the
supervisor.
other reason why we didn't go with the just cause piece
But
to
see, I
remove
see-
people
I
from the
see a
special
big-
assignment,
I see a
because
big-
if they have that issue that you're talking about, then they can be removed from a sergeant's and we pick the next person on the list.
Well, I see a big issue with
So this is
doing it
just a
that way,
pool.
too.
It is a pool, it's a
Because
pool of
if-
10.
You're talking about discrimination and other stuff. It opens up the door widely open for discrimination. Because, one person scores 100, another person scores an 89, you're going to take the 89 first.
But we do have to
There's
have
gotta be-
some other criteria, when, in the selection process besides just a test score. You took out the interview, you don't want an interview.
it's their
No.
discipline, it's their education, it's their seniority.
So once
Their
again,
background.
Yeah,
it's the.
This sounds like-
You open up the door to friends and families, which is what you said you didn't want to do.
Most definitely.
You open up the door to lawsuit discrimination lawsuits. It just,
yes.
it makes no sense for a district that's so worried about, money all the time.
We felt that this was a fair compromise to what you've been asking for. This is negotiations. You don't get everything you want, you get
I'm not
pieces,
saying
we
to give
get
us everything
pieces.
we want, I'm just saying.
There's things that
haven't
we've
gotten
given
into it.
up that we may not have, maybe shouldn't have, that we've given up in the interest of getting to an agreement.
Vicki, could I just
So
add
once
one-
again-
Sure, AC Weiner would like to speak.
I'd just like to
please.
add one point. So that rule of 10 also allows the chief to recognize if someone's been here for 10 years and is number 3 on the list, that person may have the opportunity. So I don't want you to paint a picture where it's only negative. It works both ways, but it gives the chief the opportunity to make the best selections for both the department and the employees.
So what is that going to do for morale when I come out number 1 on the test, but they don't pick me, they pick number 3 because of extenuating circumstances?
I can answer that question. So when I was chief in Coral Gables, I had a rule of 3 that was later expanded to the rule of 5.
Right.
And it had no impact on morale.
So you don't think that I'm not going to get upset that they're taking number 3 over me and I beat them on a test?
Not if it's made
more
clear that there's
experience.
a rule of 10 in place.
And it also makes it biased to
Yeah,
more
that's just
experienced
back to
officers.
I agree, we're back to the interview of the friends and family
Yeah,
plan.
you
So
got an
We're not
experienced
accomplishing
officer.
anything.
You have an experienced officer that's been here 15 years, and you know what? He hasn't made too many, he's got a couple enemies that are up there. Or not enemies, but people that just don't like him. They rub him the wrong way. Now, you get a new guy, takes a test, scores a 98. The senior officer scores 100. So what do you have to go on?
Then they're gonna
It's
refer to this and
it's
discriminate
biased towards
people.
officers, it's biased
you're-
towards the
so if I-
tenured officer.
If I understand you correctly, you'd rather make that officer that gets along with none of his coworkers a supervisor?
I'm not saying none of them, but if there's somebody up in that tower wearing gold or bars or anything else, or stars, and that person has heard something that this guy might, this guy might be, he speaks out too often, or, now you just made it biased because the newer person that's got no history in this department, oh, well, this guy's new, he's clean, we haven't heard anything about him, let's give it to him. It just, it just.
Is it the fill-in boxes, the check-off boxes, is that the rule of 10? I mean, let's be straightforward. Is that what we need the rule of 10 for? So we
Rule
can
of
make
10
sure
is
we can get every box filled?
The rule-based approach is used in a lot of organizations, we're not just bringing that out of thin air here. It's used across the HR.
Rule of 3 is a standard.
Not rule of 10.
Rule of 3, not in rule of 10.
Well, if you'd like to provide a counter-proposal to our Rule of 10, you certainly
We
may.
gave a counterproposal.
Let's go, I think we're going to caucus.
So you don't want to go through the rest of the changes there?
Oh, I thought you did.
No, there's one more that we had in there that the chief could delay naming a candidate because of, that they could delay if they're the subject of a criminal or internal investigation. We also wanted to add that it could be delayed if they're on active military deployment. So we didn't want anybody to be penalized if they're on active military deployment, they get pulled out, that suddenly, that they can't be, on the list.
Okay.
And
And
that
what-
is
what
our
kind of-
last changes. We did make sure that the Bencore piece was still there. On the page 15, there was a piece about, being relieved of the supplemental duty, and it said something, and the take-home vehicle. That really is obsolete language because take-home vehicles are not just for sergeants. They used to be. That's why we kept removing it where it says sergeant, because the sergeants are clearly going to have take-home vehicles, but so do other officers that are at the school site.
Okay. And most everyone has a take-home vehicle.
I think
in
we're
there.
getting there.
Will that affect the sergeant's ability for that insurance?
What insurance?
The vehicle insurance that the district made a policy on a year ago, 2 years ago?
The policy is the same regardless of whether you're a sergeant or you're a resource
Well,
officer.
the policy supposedly excluded certain people in the district that had in their contract to take home vehicles. No?
No, not that I'm aware of. I thought that the take-home, if you had a take-home vehicle, you had to have that non-owner liability insurance.
I thought the last time once you mentioned that if it was already in their contract about a vehicle, you couldn't change it.
No. No, we had mentioned the fact that we had talked about that a long time ago, and we had it on video when Larry Fagan was here. We talked about the fact that the policy was going to be enacted, and we were offering similar language in the contract, but that was declined. So that was the last time we talked about that non-owner liability insurance.
I think he's just asking because I heard it was reissued this year, but I don't have it in front
To
of
the
me.
best of my knowledge, they haven't taken that policy back to the board, but I could be wrong.
I guess, let me rephrase my question. Maybe I was asking it wrong. If you're contractually have a take-home vehicle in the contract, by putting a policy in that now requires that person purchase insurance, it's a change in the contract. It's a change in their terms and conditions. So that would have to be negotiated, the extra money for the insurance. Am I correct?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, and this was done at probably, I don't know, 4 years ago, 5 years ago at this point. So it's been in place this policy's been in place already for a long time. The officers already have been doing it for a number of years.
Okay.
Okay, all right, we're going to caucus. We'll be back. Okay, you ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so for Article 12, we want to stay around the 14 months. So we think that 240 would be equivalent to the 14 months, 240 regularly scheduled duty days. So that's where we left off around that. Because I think that they are off, 8 weeks during the year, so. 17.1, let's see. We're fine with the status quo language of E. See. We did want to leave, let me pull up my proposal from last time. So for G, we wanted to make sure that people who want to get comp time for those days that back up to a holiday can, if there's no undue operational hardship. So I had that idea that we wanted to add that language to number 4. Otherwise, there's no, real standard about whether or not.
Can you explain to me how to add that language to number 4? Because it grammatically and the way you're creating a secondary exception to an exception that already exists, or a reasoning behind the exception. So could you give me the exact language you want there?
Well, in my view, I'm just creating a standard for the exception. So I thought we could say upon prior written approval from the chief of police or his/her designee, such as when the district will not suffer undue operational hardship, and that just mirrors a lot of the language that we have in a lot of our other CBAs at other agencies. It's pretty standard for comp time.
Well, I just don't think grammatically that works. That was the problem that I had, because just adding that on there,
Commas.
such as, would indicate, limited, or including but not limited to. Is that what you're looking for?
If that's, I think we'd be fine with that,
Okay.
if that's fine with you. Oh, and Kevin reminded me, so for last time on subsection F, we wanted it, we had as our proposal, compensatory time may not be scheduled or utilized on any day when high liability or state mandatory training is scheduled to take place. And I think you all just had the training. So we wanted to stay with that. And I think that's pretty clear when it is high liability or state mandatory, so.
AC Weiner, can you tell me what other trainings we have in the summer that's not high liability or state mandated? Do you know? Okay.
Typically, high liability will be just several days, 1 or 2 days. And then the majority of the training is usually.
Yeah, your microphone's off.
So typically, there's usually 2 days of high liability training that's given over the summer period, as well as active shooter training, which, although not mandated by FDLE, is required by FDOE. And so with that training, and then we have the majority of the other training has to do with operational matters, with crisis response plans, has to do with reunification occasionally, leadership training, RMS, CAD training, technology training. So those are all the other training, types of training that are provided in that environment.
Yeah, so here's my concern. If active shooter training is not required by and you just have state mandated, active shooter is, I would think, is one of our,
I think Chief just said that is state mandated, if I'm not mistaken. Am I correct, Chief?
Yeah, it's mandated by the Department of Education.
okay, so by state mandated, you're not talking about state FDLE, you're talking about it could be state mandated by the Department of Education.
Right, I think we're fine with that.
Okay.
And the high liability is what we're required as police officers, not as school police officers, as police officers, to take every year or every 2 years. There's a difference.
So 17.10, we're fine with that language. And then 17.12, so I think since the very beginning, our proposal has been notification of the cancellation less than 2 hours from the scheduled start time. So we could agree dropping that down to the 1 hour, but we want the officer shall be entitled to 1 hour of pay. We want that changed to the compensation for the amount, of the actual outside detail or extra duty work that they were scheduled to work. Which I think most of those are 3 hours, but, some of them may be less, so we're fine with just having it be whatever it was.
Okay.
And ones that are left are usually, you're not leaving the school anyway, so it won't make a difference.
Okay.
And then 17.15, that's great, the joint study committees, so I just thought we could add seniority system to be used for the assignment of overtime as well as for the determination of the frequency at which outside details or extra duty work is canceled. And then, I don't know if we have to put the
Can you
information
say that
about-
again?
For a determination of the frequency at which, this actually happens. I don't think we have to put in language about the actual Google Doc and things like that, but,
I think the language we have basically says that. I mean, we can add extra, it just makes determination of the frequency,
I just thought it
I
would
mean,
make more sense, but, I mean,
okay.
but we're fine with that. And then the intent is just for the committee to actually establish the actual procedures for determining that. Like the Google Doc or something like that, right?
Well, the purpose of having the committee is to not only determine the frequency, but also what, in our mind, what the resolution would be. It's not just, how often does it happen, what is the resolution? Because the resolution may not be that the officers get paid, but it's just that, we have a system in place so that the school doesn't do this to the officers. Because I understand it's about the inconvenience. When we keep talking about an inconvenience to time spent with your family, there's not an amount of money that can bring that back. So I get it, but I would leave that to the committee to determine.
Right.
Okay.
I think that's what you, isn't that what you said?
Yeah. Okay, and then 20.1, 20.2, we're fine with leaving the status quo. 20.3, so we agree for the, that's fine, I think, with the sergeant and detective amount changes, and the ESU, that was just the title change, right?
Yes.
So that's fine, and then we're fine with the K-9 pay. That's what we said last time, but I still think we have that concern about the grandfathering in of the, I think, 2 of the 5 K-9 have 2 dogs, and it's my understanding it's because one dog's for like bombs and then the other one's for drugs. So I just think that we still have that concern about the grandfathering in of the men with the 2 canines.
Well, I understood when you had that because we had prior language that said something like they would only be assigned 1 dog. That's why the grandfather language would be necessary. This doesn't speak to that at all anymore.
Okay, so you're saying that you may take away one of the dogs?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that, before we had language in there that officers could only have 1 canine. That language has been removed from our proposal.
Right, so we just wanted clarification on whether or not that's, something that management's thinking of doing.
No, we're not thinking about doing it. I mean, but if a situation arose where the officer couldn't take care of the dog anymore, or something was occurring that performance-wise, that we might do that. But as you guys have spoken with, the canine handler, the caretaker, is the person that the dog connects with. It requires a lot more, well, it's an intensive amount, but a lot more training would have to be done with the dog to get them adjusted to a new handler. It has on there that they get it for each dog they are assigned
Right, we're
in the
just
language,
saying,
so.
We want them
One
grandfathered
stop.
in. The current handlers of those 2 dogs are not going to be separated from their dogs.
I don't think that's our intent to do that.
We're not
But-
saying
but
it's your
But the
intent, though.
language that you had for the grandfather language, the reason why we didn't put it in there, because the language as it was written would indicate that if I have 2 dogs today, and one of the dogs die, I can get another dog.
No, that's not what our
Okay.
intent is either. Our intent is to the current officers that are currently with 2 dogs will not have one of their dogs taken away.
And reassigned to
Or
somebody.
reassigned to somebody else. We understand in the future, if we have enough enough people on the department, that we can have 8 handlers, then nobody should have 2 dogs. We get that. We just don't want it happening now while these guys already are trained with their dogs, so they're actually not going to be any use to another handler anyway. And probably in the long run, it costs more money to retrain them.
Okay, we'd have to get some language to encompass that would fit within the contract, so we'll have to think of how to write that.
Those officers with 2 dogs,
Currently,
Right,
currently.
but I don't want to phrase it in such a way that if there's a performance issue or something's not going according to plan or the way it's supposed to, that we don't have an option at that point.
Right.
You know, if the officer is suddenly showing, and I don't think any of our canines would do this, but any of our canine officers are currently showing that they can't manage 2 dogs, we don't want to have language that ties our hands so that we now can't use that dog at all.
Right. I think we would
So-
be fine with those types of exceptions if there's a performance issue or some
And that's
other-
why I'm saying we're going to have to, I can't do language like right off the top of my head like that without some time to think about it. I want to go through the rest of the contract and figure that out.
Okay. So for the sergeant's special duty assignment, 20.11. I mean, I think we can move on some of the educational things, but I feel like we are pretty strong feeling about our last proposal at the last session. So we really do want to keep it to 3 years of continuous law enforcement service with the district. And then you have January 1st, 2026. We wanted to make it 2024, which was in our last proposal. That goes towards the end of the current CBA after this is closed out. So we think that's plenty of time for it to revert back. And then again, with number 2, you changed it to character. We wanted it to be a suspension or higher. Because written
But
reprimands.
suspension or higher really is only suspension. So that means you have to have been
Well,
suspended.
It's suspension or demotion, and written reprimands, I mean, really are,
Not in our contract, it's the 3rd step.
you have here written reprimand or higher.
Correct. So it's written reprimand, suspension, or the demotion that you talked about.
Right, so I'm saying we want it to be suspension or higher. Written reprimands you can get for a wide range of things.
Actually, you
and
can't. You have to get a verbal warning first and then a written warning first after that.
I know you have to go through those steps, but it's an art, not a science, and you can start out with a written reprimand. and
Correct,
It could
if
be
there's-
for more
if there
minor
is-
violations.
Okay. I just think suspension is too high a burden. I mean, obviously, if they've been suspended, but if you've had somebody who's had a written reprimand, in order to jump steps like that, especially you're jumping from one, you know, we've jumped a step before, but that means they'd have to have had the verbal warning first. We jumped the written warning to go to right to written reprimand. You're talking about somebody who it's a flagrant or purposeful violation of the contract or the rules, or they have put the district or students or other people in harm's way to be able to jump steps. There is that higher standard that we have to meet in order to do that. So I'm concerned just saying a suspension.
I mean,
Obviously, if they've been suspended, they're not going to be considered.
I think that, you know, you can have a first-time reprimand and it not be necessarily a flagrant violation.
No, it has to be under the contract. So if you look at your progressive discipline section of your contract,
Does it define it as a flagrant
it
violation?
has to be flagrant and purposeful violation of the reasonable school rules. I mean, we can pull that language, but it's in your
I
contract.
don't have it in front of me.
It doesn't
We
say
need to
that.
pull it and
I
see
don't
it.
remember that definition there.
And the other reasoning for behind that is a written reprimand is non-grievable, so if it was done unjustly, there's no way of grieving it. Now you knock the guy out of, the person out of a sergeant's supervisory position.
And I think maybe, I mean, I have to speak about it with our reps, but
Okay,
maybe
so-
a second written reprimand.
If I may, your language has, except for more serious cases, and says somebody who oversees the discipline, that is a flagrant and purposeful violation of school board rules or a real and immediate danger to the district, students, or staff. That's what a serious case is. That's when we're jumping from one level to the other. Your first level is a verbal reprimand. Your second is a written warning. Your third is a written reprimand. It's the first level of discipline that, one, can be used indefinitely and also is in their personnel file. All the verbal warning and written warnings, you know, they can't be considered for 12 months after the offense. So this is when we talked about a more serious form of discipline, that's where it starts, is the written reprimand. Because before we had wanted verbal warning and written warning, to say that the only form of discipline that would exclude somebody from being a sergeant is a suspension, I think that really brings down the standard for what we're looking for. So somebody would have to get a written warning, a written reprimand, they would have had to already been disciplined at least twice for something, and we're now at the third level. I mean, I get where you're talking about, you don't want something that's minor. I get that. That's why we said no verbal warning, no written warning. And we even talked about the fact that they get coached before they even get there. I think just saying that a suspension is the only form of discipline, why even have that as a criteria?
Well, it would be suspension or demotion, but I think
But a
that-
demotion, okay, so hold on, let's talk about that
But
concept.
if you would let me finish, please.
Okay, sure.
I think that if we could maybe say 2 reprimands, because not every one-time written reprimand is, that bad of a violation.
But then again, it's biased towards the officer, it's biased towards senior officers, because anybody with even 3 years coming in here with 3 years, and they have no real history here, because 18 months of, or whatever the probationary period was, is over close to half of their time here, they're not going to have written reprimands. So you're being biased towards the senior officer that's been here for years.
I want to bring up something you mentioned too, that you said it wasn't grievable. That's not true. In Article 29, subparagraph 3, it has that you can't grieve a verbal warning or a written warning. Written reprimands are grievable because it is considered formal discipline.
I think you meant for arbitration.
Well, that is, it's grievable. So
I don't know
Yeah,
if
then I
you
was
can take it to
mistaken.
arbitration. I'd have to read.
I don't know why you wouldn't, but we can certainly look for that. I don't know that we ever have that you can grieve it, but you can't arbitrate it. That doesn't even make any sense, but we'll look
We
at
have that in other contracts. I just don't know what this one says.
I would think it would be in the progressive discipline section.
I would think that we would be comfortable with, 2 or more written reprimands. But I've seen officers get a written reprimand, which I don't think,
Have you seen it here?
I've seen it at other places, so it could
Right,
happen
so
here.
I'm not talking other places, I'm talking here. Have you seen it here?
I have only had a few IAs here, but I don't think any of them have come to conclusion yet. But I'm saying that I've seen it where law enforcement officers get a written reprimand and it shouldn't disqualify them from a promotion.
And quickly going through the grievance procedure, there isn't anything that would say that a written reprimand can't be taken to arbitration.
Can I ask you a question, and maybe somebody can answer that? Is this requirement required for lieutenant and above also?
I don't know the answer to that.
Can anybody anscer that?
Chief
So
would have
for
the answer.
actual-
I'm not involved in anything with lieutenants, it's not bargaining.
Okay, as far as I know, it's not. So let's try to keep it, let's keep it at the same playing field. You don't want a first-line supervisor to have a written reprimand or written warning, but yet you'll allow a captain or above, or a lieutenant or above to have up to an arrest.
Disparate treatment. That would be disparate treatment.
Correct.
Well, can you articulate to us what you're relying on for that? Because I'm not aware of that. You're saying that is the case for captains?
I'll speak to you later on off.
We need it on the record. I mean, if
It's not, let's just make it a fair playing field. If it's not required for lieutenant and above, let's not require it for the sergeants.
right, but you're saying it
Simple.
is required, it's not required for lieutenants. What's the basis for that knowledge? Because I don't deal with them, so I'm just
I
asking
read,
you
I
as
read the
expert.
proposal for the lieutenants when they came out through PeopleSoft, and I read the requirements, and it wasn't part of their requirements to be a lieutenant or above. And same as a captain. It's
Are
not,
you talking like in the ad on PeopleSoft?
when,
think he's
when
just-
when the job listing comes up, it shows you,
Okay, yeah, because it doesn't necessarily show all the qualifications all the time, especially something like that. I'm not sure that would even be in there.
It
but-
also, that was a different process, because that one had an interviewing stage as well. So you're mixing apples and oranges.
well, not,
But
they didn't
what
always have
discipline-
interview.
I think he's just wondering what discipline
Knocks them out.
disqualifies them.
Well,
from being-
unfortunately, we're going to have to kind of move this along. We had a hard stop at 12 o'clock because there's a board meeting. They've got to get the room set up for the board meeting tonight. So if we can finish going through your proposals.
Okay. So 3, I think 3 was similar to what we proposed last time. And then for education, so A is fine, that's status quo. B, we thought we could even make it 2 years to open it up even more, and then that would go along with the 60 semester hours. So of active military service or, I think, did you mean to put and, or received an honorable
Or.
discharge?
No,
Okay.
well, they and has received an honorable discharge. We're not going to accept somebody who's received less than honorable discharge.
So, well, you could, okay, that makes sense. All right, so C, and then I think C was just, we were concerned that's a little bit too broad, like what does that mean? So 120 hours of law enforcement job-related training? Because we just proposed the CEUs.
Right, and the CEUs in our mind was even broader than this.
Okay, well,
Because the CEU, is my
thought this was pretty
understanding, if you
broad.
declare a
So-
meeting as, an hour-long meeting, you can get a CEU for an hour-long meeting. We didn't want to have
That's
it.
not necessarily true either.
The hours,
So what are you thinking with this?
Well, it's hours of law enforcement job-related training that they get off campus. It's not related to us, that they go in on their own, maybe, just to be completely outrageous. In the summer, they decide to take a class in Quantico, on, interrogation techniques or something with the FBI.
Well, or something a little bit more, I guess,
That's
what would
very-
be
that's very-
usual? What would that?
That's not
what
a
would
lot
this
of
look
training, though.
like?
It's not, yeah.
I'll give you an example. I'm a traffic homicide investigator with 200 hours. That doesn't make me a supervisor.
and 100
So
hours.
But I'm curious, because you're saying that your training doesn't make you a supervisor, but your military duty does, and you may never have gained rank in the military.
I
And if-
did.
I'm not talking about you specifically. I'm talking about someone with a honorable discharge may never have gone above an E3.
Okay.
And so never supervised anyone. So I'm losing you in the rationale.
Well, the 120 hours alone, when we had it as CEUs, one CEU is equal to 10 hours. So if we were equivalent, one CEU is equal to 1 credit. If we're making it, if we have a 60 college credit requirement, that would make it, 600 CEUs, not 120 hours. It'd make it 600 hours. So to lower from 600 hours to 120 hours is a big difference.
So when you talk about 60 credit hours, not all of those credits are relevant to police work. However, the 120 would be relevant to police work.
I guess a better way of looking at it is in a 2-year degree, when we put that as a standard to get hired in a police agency, any police agency, it was more or less, it wasn't because of what the degree was, it was shown that you continued something for 2 years of
Continuing education.
education. It was, you put your mind, you did 2 years of the same, without flip-flopping back and forth. Same thing with the military. You do 2 years in the military, you got 2 years of the same type of, I don't know how
And
you
an
make.
associate's degree you don't have to finish it in 2 years. You could have taken 10 years to finish it.
I understand that. But when
Okay.
you're coming here, but that's part of the requirements. There has to be a reason that they put college education in there, which has nothing to do with police work.
Well, it was an
It's
associate's
a
degree.
structured
Well,
environment
it was an
for 2
associate's-
years.
it's
It's a
an-
structured environment for 2 years in the military. That's kind of what the whole general idea of originally with the putting into our field.
And 120 hours in any related law enforcement field can be done in a month and a half. You can take one, class to FDLE, that's an 80-hour class. It's 80 hours.
2 weeks.
2 weeks. And then you take another 40 hours.
That's if you're not working. So, I mean, you're dedicating time to do that.
Yeah, okay, well, that's, we
It's
have.
still, the standard
That's
is
called
there.
negotiation. We don't think that's.
Yeah, the standard
that's-
is.
that's-
So, but your standard, we're saying 120, you're saying what, 600?
No, we're not saying 600.
Move
We
it.
liked
That's what
our
Alex
last
said, that's why I'm
proposal.
throwing the 600 out, so I'm just curious
I'm
as to what
equivalent
number you're looking
I'm
at.
equivalent the CEUs right now to your proposal with the 60 semester hours. That would be 600 at that, if that's what your equivalent. The 60 semester hours in an accredited college to a CEU would be 600 CEUs.
So what I'm trying to get at, because Officer Lynch is saying something different than you are, so Ms. Mendoza, what is your counter to the 120? Do you have a counter to what
We
120?
didn't understand what you meant, so that's why we were coming in here to ask you about it. I think we still like our CEU proposal because those actually go through some kind of like accreditation or like approval process.
Yeah.
So I just didn't really know what you meant by 120 hours of, you know, that could be, like you said,
Very
some
vague.
random training.
But I believe that Officer Lynch was just saying that it wasn't about the certification, it was about sustaining the effort for a period of time.
And I agree,
Those
and
are two-
I
Those are
don't-
two
yeah.
different things.
Yeah, and I personally don't think that 120 hours of training is a lot of training.
But we only had it for half of it, to
We
use
had-
the CEUs
in our
for half
proposal,
of
it was
the needed.
In our
Credit.
proposal we gave you last time was 30 CEUs.
Right.
All right, so I keep looking at the clock because we've run out of time already. So can we move through the rest and get, you know, what your counters are?
I mean, we're pretty much status quo on our proposal.
So you're not willing to move on any of the changes, the movement we've made, you're not willing to make any further
We
movement?
made a lot of movement last time. I think that everybody thinks of it as a promotional exam. It's been a promotional exam for a long time. We are fine with the 30 days. Thanks for agreeing to that. We don't like the rule of 10. We think that it could lead to a lot of issues. We're fine under selection process with the active military deployment language. And that's
So
about
is
it.
there a rule that you're willing to consider, instead of just, hey, you got the highest grade on the test, you get to be the boss?
Well, I don't look at it like
No, I
that,
don't
because
either. See,
we
because
are
you
looking
took
at
out
the
the interview.
education, we're looking at seniority, we're looking at the discipline, so it's not just,
But
hey,
that
you're the
doesn't-
boss.
That does not look into seniority and discipline. So I can have, if you scored, under your proposal, I have 3 years in the district, I scored 100% on the test, I've been in the district for 2 years, or, sorry, 3 years, versus an officer who scored 99%, who's been with us for 15 years, we're giving it to the person who came in the door 3 years ago. Because that's what you're saying with
Right.
this rule, that we have to take the highest score. So
Well, yours would be,
ours would be if we had 10 people in there, number 2 has been with us for 15 years and scored a 99.9. They're the second on the list. We could pick them over the person who was first on the list, who's only been with us for 3 years.
or someone who's only been here 2 years.
Well, under your proposal, I'm saying taking your proposal, they've been here for 3 years. They scored 100%. They're number 1 on the list. Number 4 on the list maybe scored, let's say number 4, they scored a 98%. There's a couple people ahead of them because there was 100, there's a 99.5 and a 99. I got a 98%. I've been with the district for 15 years, but I'm number 4 on the list.
Well, if you want to do a point system, I mean,
Yes,
for
there
seniority. then-
there are examinations that you take that give you extra credit for that precise thing, for seniority, if you wish to take that into account. Again, this is negotiations, you could add that to it.
Well, that's why we wanted to have that rule, so that we could make those, that's the negotiation piece.
It's too broad.
that we-
Again, now, we're not being wise guy when we use that term. It's actually a term that was derived from people in the field, the family, friends and family plan. We want to be able to eliminate with the perceived cronyism, nepotism, discrimination, whatever term you want, because that is an issue with the officers. The officers believe that I have spoken to, by taking a test, it's like a kid in the school. You take a test and valedictorian's number 1. Who cares if if they lack social skills? I'm just using an analogy. So if I take a test and I come out number 1, I did better number 2, number 3, maybe you should have studied a little harder. That's my response.
We actually
And they're
care.
on- and they're
we
on
actually care
probation
whether
anyway,
they have
so-
social skills or not.
Huh?
That's the difference. We actually care whether they have social skills or not.
Oh, so therefore, yeah, with social skills, so then therefore, that actually takes into an account something that could be someone's perception of that.
And if
So
there are
we're
social
disregarding someone's knowledge because of the fact that we perceive them to be social, because they might have a beer with someone.
Okay, well, that's not what he's talking about, though.
Oh, social skills.
Okay,
Be able
so.
to talk.
Let's call it interpersonal skills. Those are the soft skills that leadership needs to be successful in any job. If you have a leader who's dictatorial and deals from positional management, whereas I'm the boss, I tell you what to do, that goes nowhere. It does not engender any
But you
kind
also,
of,
you have also the same option as you do when you're taking the line supervision class. You have 6 weeks to take that, or whatever was in there, to take that class. You now also have the same opportunity during that same time to say to this guy, you're not cutting it. You're on probation, the same way you are when you were a brand-new officer.
no, okay, so there is no probational period for sergeant, except that it
But
is
you
an
can move them-
at-will.
But you can move them at any time you want, right?
Understood.
Okay, so there's no reason that you can't turn around and move them again. I mean, unless you want to make it, I mean, if we want to make this the way it should be and the way it's designed as a rank, then I agree, then we should have maybe a little bit more stricter
Okay,
type of things.
With all this fight, this is a paramilitary organization.
I understood. Okay, so is there anything else that we're missing?
I'm sure we'll talk more about it, but that's all we have for now.
Okay. All right, well, I thank you for coming today, and we'll try and get a date sooner rather than later, and maybe for a longer period of time if we can get the room.
Okay. All
Okay.
right, thank you.
All right, thank you.